All right, guys, I'm very excited about our next guest, Kaelan Dorr. He's been on the show before, and when he was on the show before, we talked a lot about his Twitter and how funny his tweets are and his job with the Trump administration. But right now, Kaelan is on for something else, a new endeavor that he has started. Kaelan, thank you so much for joining the show.
Hey, Grace. No, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. This the call-ins from folks have been really, really compelling. This has been quite the look at the state of affairs in Massachusetts. I don't blame you. You got to get down to Florida.
Kaelan, I need to get out. I need to get out, and I needed to get out yesterday. It is not good here. It is. We are in lockdown, my friend. Kaelan, tell us a little bit about the America First Policy Institute, who's involved in this, and what you guys are doing.
Oh, absolutely. So this week we launched the America First Policy Institute. Our president and CEO, Brooke Rollins, who is actually the head of the Domestic Policy Council of the White House, Larry Kudlow, who you all probably know very well. He's been a staple in the movement for longer than I can remember. He's the vice chair and board chairman of our Center for American Prosperity, so he's kind of taken on the economics. And then the chair of our board, Linda McMahon, who was our SBA administrator during the Trump administration, kind of joined forces. And the spirit of the organization is essentially, when time ran out in January, what if we just didn't put our pencils down as a movement, right? What if we continued to develop policy and things that, explore and research things that, continue the work that was started under the Trump administration. And so that's what we're doing here. There are about 20 centers and 40 staff, and everyone's kind of working around the clock and not putting their pencils down in order to make sure that we're still developing those things, and that when Biden eventually steps down, or doesn't win election, that the movement remains strong and grounded in strong policy.
And Kaelan, we are going to have a little fun during this segment and talk about the Green New Deal and talk about CNN and Project Veritas and all that good stuff. But I did want to ask you, because this is a question I get from a lot of people, which is people are feeling, every day when I do the show, I have plenty of sound. I have tons of material with Joe Biden. And I always say it would be funny if it wasn't so sad. And the feeling I get from most of America right now is that they are sad and they are a little bit scared of the future, the integrity of our elections, if we're ever going to get back into power again, and kind of the destruction that the Democrats seem to be pretty intent on. What do you say to people who are feeling a little bit discouraged?
I would say help is on the way. There is feeling that way, while it may be out of everyone's control, it's a symptom of the Democrats' oppression, and this is what they want, right? This is, when you feel down, this is how they win. The entire, leftist movement is engineered to separate us from one another, right? To segment the Republican Party and make sure, we aren't united as a front. And I would take solace in the fact that you're not alone. If you're a conservative out there, whether you're, 12 or 82, you're not alone in feeling that, some of the policies being put forth by the Biden administration, some of the narratives that they're, putting forward, and not even just Biden, but, Congress as well. If you're discouraged by the fact that Maxine Waters is out, calling for open confrontation, you're not alone in feeling those things. Not only, I would encourage everyone to find, for lack of a better phrase, I'm rolling my eyes here, I know you can't see me, but find a safe space, find a community of folks to talk to and really share ideas, because that's how we keep our movement alive. That's how we put America first. That's kind of what I'd say. I also say follow me on Twitter. I tweet too many times about finding Pop-Tarts in my blazer jacket pockets at work. So that's also a good way to fight the blues.
Yes, no, exactly. And I know I roll my eyes too when you say safe space, but I do know what you mean, because I think a lot of times people are so afraid to speak up and voice their opinions because they don't think anyone else shares them, or they think they're going to get canceled or ostracized. And really, you would be surprised, guys, how many people... And it's the same reason why Rush Limbaugh was so successful. It's the same reason why talk radio is so successful, is because people get in their cars and they go, oh, I feel that way too. And the truth is that there's a huge part of America that feels exactly how, if you're listening to the show, people feel just like you are right now, and you can't get down. Now, Kaelan, let's move on. Speaking of some of this legislation, I have to say, I knew that the Green New Deal was bad, but then they had to formally reintroduce it, and I was reminded all over again. What do you think of this legislation, of Ed Markey, speaking of Massachusetts, getting once again in front of the cameras to introduce this? Are you as disgusted as all of us are?
It's a really scary piece of legislation. It is straight from a horror movie in that, just when you think it's gone, it finds its way back into your life, right? And so, this isn't simply put, this is transformative policy that is hardly related to fighting climate change. It's a $90 trillion bill with wish list items like universal health care and like a guaranteed jobs plan. Some kind of the most wild ideas you could think of from a leftist perspective. And the fact that they're reintroducing it again, I'm not one to speak. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a liberal. But one would think that this means it is like the official party platform. It shows where Democrats want to take our country. And after 4 or 5 years of just incredible economic prosperity, this legislation, which is again an unfettered disaster, really threatens any potential economic growth for our children, our children's children, and so on.
Right, and it seems like it's all really clouded in vague terms, in the same way that the infrastructure bill, they started saying everything was infrastructure. Childcare is infrastructure. Donuts are infrastructure. Wind is infrastructure. Everything was infrastructure. And now I'm seeing this with the Green New Deal. Everything is climate change, or everything is a means of combating climate change. And you're right. I'm looking at some of these numbers, and it says, $1 trillion here, $172 billion on public housing over 10 years. And I'm kind of sitting there going, I don't know a lot about global warming, but I don't really see what this has to do with it.
I mean, Grace, AOC was on the Capitol steps the other day blaming racial injustice in our country on global warming, which I can't even fathom the mental gymnastics you have to do in order to bend yourself into that kind of pretzel and say that and truly believe it, right? And I think the most scary part of all this, right, is that for the first time, in our lifetimes, we saw a consequential president who put forth policies that really tapped into, what makes our country great. The spirit of America is kind of how I like to talk about it, because, I talk about this so much. And, inspiring innovation and opportunity and, expanded access is more specifically expanded access to things like shale oil and fracking. And, I mean, we saw reduced prices in the energy sector. It saved, I think, the average family of four about $2,500 a year, which is just absolutely bonkers. And already, Biden's taken office in January, and already, gas prices in my neighborhood are going up, and that's just not going to stop. If this is their party platform, then, I'm going to have to get in better shape and go buy a bicycle and bike to work every day. It's untenable.
Yeah, I mean, gas prices are going up everywhere, but if it makes you feel any better, there are dogs in the White House again, and there are no more mean tweets. So that should make you feel a little bit better as you pull out your credit card. Now, Kaelan, I do want to talk. It is called the America First Policy Institute, and when we talk about the Green New Deal and some of anything to do with climate change, the part of it that I find the most amazing is the fact that a lot of what they want to do, the Democrats want to do with climate change and their way of fighting it, is by putting America last, because we are no longer going to be energy independent. We are going to start, kind of hamstringing ourselves with all of these rules. And in the meantime, other countries are just going to get more powerful, and they're not going to care as much about all of these rules that they will break.
Yeah, and every time this issue comes up, I'm reminded of an incredible line, and President Trump gave a speech in the Rose Garden when withdrawing from the Paris Climate Accords, and everyone kind of remembers it, right? He says that our leaders are elected to represent Pittsburgh, not Paris, and this kind of is a symptom of the way that liberal ideology dictates policy decisions. It's exactly like you said. It's putting America last. It's almost teaching, training future generations that to be American is to be, ashamed of certain parts of your country, or, you should be willing to sacrifice so that we could be more like Paris, right? And we were already on the path towards improving our global environmental outlook, right? Like all these things that they claim that they're solving with this bill, we've been solving slowly since 2005. We've reduced emissions by more than any country in the world from, I think, like 2005 to 2018. So, this is it's bald-faced lying in order to achieve, this intended narrative that a lot of our politicians have. Unfortunately, they're not proposing policies that put America first because they've got something else in mind. They know the destination they want to go to, and they're going to do whatever it takes to get there.
And you just mentioned that line about Pittsburgh and Paris, but I always remember the Trump line where he said, other countries get a break because they're growing countries, and then he said, "Can we be growing too?" And I always think that, like, why do we have to take a back seat to all these other countries? Why are Democrats so opposed to us being strong and independent and forceful on the national stage? Kaelan, Dorr, lastly, I just wanted to ask you, what was your reaction when you saw, I know that you are very much aware that CNN was not a fan of Trump in his 4 years as president. But when you saw that Project Veritas video where CNN, Charlie Chester, was just admitting that they were trying their hardest to get Trump out, how did you feel?
Media bias and media accountability are kind of my bread and butter. And all that aside, I think the most shocking thing was that this Charlie Chester guy got 5 dates on Tinder with somebody and wasn't suspicious of it. I think that was probably the most alarming part of this. When you work at CNN, I can't imagine that happens often. But, it's just absolutely shocking. Things like, just to connect it to what you were talking about earlier, things like people ratting out their neighbors going to restaurants and things like that, it's all a symptom of this media, this bias, right? They know, like I said, the same thing with the Democrats and the left applies to the media here at large. They know where they want to go, and they'll do anything they can to get there. The guy used words like propaganda, manipulating coverage to support Black Lives Matter's narrative. Like they know exactly what they're doing, and it's really warping the sense of truth among our fellow men and women. And that's why you see things like what you're describing here. I could sit here and listen to you take calls from people all day. And I think you could, if you left the line open, you'd be flooded with things all day long. And it's because, this is just a larger symptom of, a very sick industry.
Yeah, and I think that the scary part is that a lot of people realize it and pay attention, but then there's other people, and Kaelan, I know you know this, younger people our age who get the alerts from CNN and they just look at it and go, oh, okay, now I know the story. They just get the little ping on their phone and that's it. Right. They don't do any deep diving. Kaelan, Dorr, thank you so much for being with us. America First Policy Institute. We're very excited. We hope to have on another one of your group members maybe next week would be great. And you guys can follow Kaelan on Twitter at KDorr, DORR_USA. Thanks so much for joining the show, Kaelan.
Hey, thank you, Grace. Y'all take care.